The 2-5 profile, the Hermit Heretic, or as I like to say, the Introvert Disruptor. You are called to change the world. Nourish your gifts in the quiet of your sanctuary while listening to the calls of the universe around. You will be called in divine time to change the world, to disrupt the old ways and create a path for the new. Nourish your talents, nourish your soul, nourish your being. Your time to give will come. Be patient. This nourishment will fuel your impact when you are called to care for the other, to universalize, to create change, to embody. Your time is coming. You are here to change the world. All right, so let's dive into the 2-5 profile. And these are people who, you know, it's important to understand that the 2 and the 5 of this profile are in harmony with one another. The 2 needs alone time in a place that feels really good in order for them to do what they love. And it's really during this alone time where they're honing their innate gifts, where they're waiting to be called out by other people. And then the fifth line is here to come in and save the day when all other traditional ways of doing things have failed. The 5 comes in and universalizes and transforms. And, it's important to understand that both of these lines exist in the projection field. So if you were a 2-5, understanding your strategy and authority and honoring that is really important because otherwise you'll get burned at the stake. And so, you know, the fifth line here is called in to save the day and universalize. But if they say yes to the incorrect projections or they aren't really clear in their communication about what they're going to save the day on, ultimately they end up in a place where, Raw says, quote unquote, burned at the stake. But in modern day times, this is where your reputation is going to be impacted. This is where, you can become an outcast potentially. And so the reality is the combination with these two is that the 2 is going to need that time to hone their gifts and talents, even if there is pressure from the projection field to come in and save the day. And these are people who often can and will feel unfulfilled and threatened if they answer the wrong call or they step into the projection field at the wrong time. So balance is a really important thing. And these are people with a very special energy. We can feel that the 2-5 can help us. And ultimately, that's sort of the plight of the projection field of their profile. Like others are like, ooh, I can feel this person can help me. And the reality is, the 2-5 is here to do incredibly special things, right? They're here to transform the world with their genius, to bring practicality to the other. But this comes only after they've had time in their introvert mode, in their sanctuary, and when the call for what they can save the day is correct for them based on their strategy and authority. And the reality is these are people who can, when aligned, make a very large, extraordinary, and far-reaching impact. They break norms. They do things in their own way. They bring hope to a world that a new dawn is possible. And the reality is they observe, they bring practicality, and that's really important for them. Two fives bring a lot of practicality. They're passionate, they're fierce, and they're not afraid to lead when the call is correct. And the reality is these are people who are good at handling pressure. Um, like these people do well under pressure. And there's sort of this air of mystery around them. You know, if you think about the two is on the first floor of the house, if we use the metaphor of the house when we're thinking about the hexagram, but the fifth line's up in the attic. It's mysterious, but you know, people can energetically feel how any fifth line, not just the 2-5, but any fifth line can help them, right? That's why everybody always wants to kind of bask in the aura of a fifth line. And they project this onto the fifth line, and fifth lines are often never truly seen. So when this profile, the 2-5, steps into a room, people are magnetized to it, because it can save them in times of need. And these are people who often attract a following or a loyal group of people, as a result of that. And you know, of course, it's important to understand these are people who are naturally withdrawn due to the fact that they're always projected on. And so they can feel really unsure of other people. Like, is this loyalty? Is this trust? Does this person actually see me? And that can often lead to them energetically feeling kind of uncomfortable around other people. And therefore they may like stay safe and not honor their strategy and authority, even though they're being called to do certain things. But that clarity in terms of like what you're willing to save the day on becomes really important. And it's not uncommon for people who have this profile to actually receive more invitations, if they are more withdrawn. And these are people who are deeply creative. They often excel at marketing. They handle pressure well. They can really amplify their natural gifts when they study. And the reality is they'll get many chances in life to handle the projection field. And so they kind of bounce from being called in the 2 to calling others in the 5 as they go about establishing, you know, this practical solution in the world. And it's quite magical. The thing is here, though, the challenges of the 2-5 is that, you know, they are part lower triagram and part upper triagram. And at times they can neglect their own needs in order to serve others. And the 2 doesn't necessarily need other people to fulfill their destiny, while the 5 does. So this often creates a tension in their being, even though there's harmony in their profile. So they also live in the projection field. They also handle pressure really well. So they can kind of get tired from handling pressure all the time. And because they live in the projection field, they may often get ridiculed, or people might not actually see them for who they are. They see the 2-5 for what they want from them, not for who they are. And from a very early age, you know, this profile needs to establish boundaries and not be forced into doing things that they don't want to do. When they're forced to do things, they're often knocked out of alignment, and it can take a great deal of time for these people to kind of get back to who they are. And as a child, you know, the 2-5 is often, they're often labeled. They often kind of get a reputation. You have a reputation for being a blank kid, whatever that is. And it's often because they have just one day, but it kind of stays with them. It follows them around for a while. And that wound is often carried into adulthood, which keeps the 2-5 out of alignment. And as a result of the fact that they are projected on by a very early age, they often grow up too fast, or they're expected to be further along, or they aren't, you know, they aren't really seen. Like they get a lot of responsibility put onto them. And oftentimes this leads to rebellion, the unhealthy kind, in adulthood. Because they're expected to told to do something, and they just don't feel respected or honored, for who they are. And this kind of leads them to have a lot of unease in the world, and can lead them to feel incredibly uncomfortable. And this often results in sort of like this hoarding that happens, this selfishness that can happen with that fifth line. And the reality is this is often a great way we can use that as a compass, right? So if the 2, you know, they move from this place of depletion and nourishment and back again, and the fifth line moves from sort of this selflessness to this selfishness, or this I don't feel attractiveness to this attractiveness. We can almost use that as a compass in order to guide us, right? As a 2-5, we can use that as a compass to say, oh, I might be out of alignment here. And the reality is, as a 2-5, these are people who are here to step in when everything else has failed. And the 2-5 is incredibly good at handling pressure, and they're good at handling pressure. I know I've mentioned this a couple of times, but they handle pressure well because of the fact that they've been projected on their whole life. And so it's sort of this double-edged sword. It can be really a challenge, the fact that they've been projected on their whole life. But in the real world, I often see these are people who are like event planners. They are people who are under constant pressure and can manage that pressure well because of the fact that they have been dealing with it their whole lives. They really they know how to manage it probably better than many of the other profiles, because it's a double projection field that they live in. And you might be thinking, oh, well, the 5-2 must be the same way. It's not. The 2-5 really handles pressure in a way that many of the other profiles cannot. And they're here to serve others. They're here to make a big impact. But the reality is they have to make sure they're answering the right call. You're honoring that strategy and authority that you have. So here are a few questions for the 2-5 profile. Is it practical? Am I being called in when the majority is in crisis? That's really important. Do I actually want to save the day on this? Is this something that I actually want to do? Do I have a practical solution I can bring to the table? Have I been clear with what I'm willing to save the day on? Have I established clear boundaries for myself? Am I universalizing my message? Am I being respected by those closest to me? Have I spent the time I needed cultivating and nourishing my talents? Am I calling on others to create a new foundation? Am I showing up for myself and sharing my message? Am I rebelling just to rebel, or am I rebelling because I found a new practical way to do things? Am I honoring my need for alone time? And that is the 2-5 Hermit Heretic, or Introvert Disruptor, as I like to say. Thanks so much for tuning in.